Yesterday, we had a in-depth discussion about Jesus and Barabbas, understanding how they relate to not only the scriptures during the time period that both men were in bodily form. We also discussed in depth what it means to us today. And out of it came, I do believe, a better understanding of what the scapegoat is and where it originated, and also help us to understand that during that period, there was the priests were entering writings that they felt were pertinent, and they were doing things such as animal sacrifices and saying the Lord required them, yet the prophet spoke concerning the lack of that requirement from the Creator. So I don't think we came to any conclusions in that it was over with, but we concluded that it relates to us today by virtue of the African being the scapegoat, as well as the deliverer, because Barabbas being African and Jesus being African as well, both represented concepts that are far beyond the pseudo-concepts that were given to us from the lips of religious manipulators. We also concluded that it is imperative that we look further, not only at these scriptures, but all, in order for us to get a deeper sense of understanding of not only the role that we have been cast in during this period, but also the role that has been thrust upon us by those who would love to continue the process of manipulation. By no means were we finished yesterday, even though we came to those conclusions. I do think that we probably should begin by asking if there are any additions to be made to our discussion, questions to be raised, and once we eke past this phase of that, we will then entertain any questions whatsoever from anyone who may have written them down yesterday, or who may get from our discussion questions that they would like to have answers to, or to get greater clarity on some of the statements that were made. So, having said that, I would like to see if there are any further comments to be made, especially from those of us who are engaged in the conversation yesterday.
Good morning. This is Audrey. My question yesterday when I had read through the scriptures and all that, first, the thing it immediately made me think was that, are we Africans the scapegoat? So would you elaborate on that a little more, since I missed most of the discussion yesterday? I'd appreciate that. Thanks.
We have talked about in the past how the African has been for quite some time carrying the burdens of this world, and how the African is the one who is to bring balance and harmony to the universe. And if we look at how we have been carrying those burdens, then we began to see something that looks exactly like being the scapegoat, and that is this. The scapegoat took upon it the entanglement of all of the nation, and in taking those entanglements upon itself, it was led out into the wilderness. And when we were, as a people, and I'm not speaking individually, I'm speaking conceptually, were brought to this country in particular, but others around the world, but to this country in particular, we were blamed and still are being blamed for everything that has gone wrong in society. And we have always been the ones who've had the forgiving heart. We've always been the ones who have sought redress at the seat of power, not understanding that it is the very seat of power that has placed these burdens on our shoulders. Barabbas, in the same way, sought redress by being a seditionist. He sought redress in the same way that the nation of Palestine had been conquered by the Romans, only to find out that it was not going to be successful. Jesus, on the other hand, recognized who he is, and that is the deliverer. And in being the deliverer, he recognized that deliverance comes from understanding what it means when he says that love covers a multitude of sin, and understanding that the methods used to bring about peace and harmony are not human violent methods. They are spiritually violent methods. And the spiritual violence means that the concepts are taken over by forcefully proclaiming the truth, by making every effort to speak the truth in the face of, in the presence of power, without regard to what the outcome would be. And we also see that Jesus and Barabbas were two sides of the same coin. Speaking again about Barabbas, his name meaning the son of Abrum, had no knowledge of self, and that is the reason he sought to find redress at the seat of power, and to do it by using seditious methods. We, to this day, are accused of being murderers, just like Barabbas was when we seek redress at the seat of power. And I was talking with Cassidy, and one of the things she said was that if we notice, the first thing that happens when a policeman kills one of us is we're labeled as a criminal. And that is the same thing that happened with Barabbas. More importantly, Jesus was not even labeled as a criminal before he was killed. And it was all too easy for them to take an African man and beat him beyond recognition, knowing that he was guilty of nothing other than speaking truth. But please recognize that Jesus was not delivered into the hands of Pilate because of any seditious acts that he had been involved in. He was delivered to the hand of Pilate by the preachers, the priests, the pastors. That's who delivered him into the hands of Pilate, and then convinced their congregation when Pilate walked out to make it for them to make a decision about who would be crucified, that they were to seek the crucifixion of Jesus, because they were concerned about the power that they had with the state. I hope that helps. If not, please ask some more questions.
Yes, it does. And it makes a lot of sense, too. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Any more comments or questions?
This is Barbara. Good morning, everyone. Just a brief comment. Part of what we are about is to bring balance to the scriptures, and that's what was done with Barabbas. We probably need to look at Judas and other scriptures that seemingly are imbalanced, but what we understand is that I think as Ron said yesterday, one thing is intertwined into the other, and they are two faces of the same coin. Is what we finally said, and just like we have before we understood who we were, there was a part of us who was very much like Barabbas, the son of a womb who lived as a human, as a man. But as we became aware of the Elohim we are the Jesus, the son of the human, the man who lives as a spiritual being. So what we need to do in the scriptures is when things just seem out of whack, in a sense that they don't make sense, they don't resonate, we need to find a balance as we look at the scriptures. And I think that's what we've been doing all along.
I agree with that. I honestly, when I think about it, my whole life was lived as Barabbas in a seditious state against the powers that be. And I can say that without reservation. And having lived that way, now being on the other side of the coin, I see very clearly that Barabbas and Jesus, when we speak of them in terms of concept, they're exactly the same person. It's one, as Barbara said, Jesus living as a human, but living spiritually, and Barabbas being spiritual, not recognizing it, living as a human. And that in itself speaks to the duality of every single one of us who are seekers of truth. If you are not seeking the truth and are still living as Barabbas, then you are not experiencing what duality feels like, because it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It means that you're not experiencing it. Whether you experience it or not, it does indeed exist. Any questions or comments, please?
I have an observation. I think that's what you and Barbara just said is right on the money. I mean, we've all in our own way lived as a Barabbas. He who won't change, but doesn't know how to go about it, and through politics, through the changing of laws, through civil rights acts, and through your frustrations, and we've come about to the point where we are now. And I even say that just like you can make a case that what's the boy's name? Cain does not rebel, then there could be no self. In other words, Barabbas comes to his senses and sees that what he's done may not have been the right action. And I'm talking spiritually here. And it brings about the rebirth of righteousness, bringing it from the darkness, ruins that you had covered it under. And without Barabbas going through what he did, we could not have come back to resurrect Jesus. So the two things go hand in hand. what's interesting now is looking at it from a perspective. I remember reading something that a book pastor gave me, one of these little nerdy books. I can't remember which one it is, but it talked about the righteous man having a right to interpret dreams and in ways look at things and determine outcomes. And, you know, if we are the scapegoat, what is the outcome that we see? That is the exciting part of it. The resurrection, now you also get to be a part of the outcome or take a look at what that light's supposed to look like. I hope that makes sense.
It does, and I do think that when we talk about looking at our desired outcome, it does not require us being specific about how it should look specifically. And what I mean by that is we are not required to be specific about what harmony is supposed to look like. And one of the reasons I believe we're not supposed to be is because we've never seen it before. And I don't think our mind can contain what harmony looks like or what the experience is, because when we experience harmony or inner peace, it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to give an explanation of what that experience is. We can use all kinds of adjectives in an attempt to describe it, but no matter how many words we use to describe it, we can't use enough words for someone else to have that experience by hearing those words. So I think that also is the same when we talk about humanity being at peace. Questions, comments? I believe that there's something that Ron had mentioned about this being representative of the new heaven and the new earth. That's what balance is, the new heaven and the new earth. Knowing how to conflate the two, the earth consciousness with the heavenly, or with enlightenment, to the extent that enlightenment becomes the prevailing force. I did not realize how much of how when we started this journey, I did not realize that a lot of the understandings of where we are now has as a foundation understanding what it means when we talk about the new heaven and the new earth, something we discussed quite some time ago. And I want to see if that makes sense, first of all, that this is what we're actually talking about, the idea of a new heaven and a new earth. Does that make sense? Hello? Can you see that parallel?
Yes.
Okay. This to me was serendipitous as well, because the day that someone pretty much insisted that I look at that, I'm like, no, I don't think so, and I did it. I'm not going to call Kathy's name because I don't want to put her on the spot for having told me that I needed to teach that at the very least, because I don't want you to think that Kathy would push me to do that. But anyway, when we looked at that, it gave us reason to pause, and because again, as Barbara had stated earlier, we have not been seeing the balance in the scriptures, and we've not been seeing the connectivity of everything in the scripture in the way that it has been presented to us. If we go back to some of the previous things that we've taught, what we're beginning to see now is the intricate details of what all of this means. We have seen the overview, but we have not seen the intricate details, and we are beginning to see that now. And I do think it's very interesting that we are looking at Jesus and Barabbas, which means that we are at that place of crucifixion, and what came after crucifixion was what did Jesus say to them? Go ye therefore. That was supposed to come after crucifixion, and I believe that the go ye therefore is what we are in the process of experiencing. And I don't mean that in this sense that we are going to be organizing, quote-unquote, churches and setting up different congregational forms of teachings around the world. That's not what I think at all. I believe that what we are actually doing is engaging the pineal gland of the world. We are engaging the soul of this world. We are removing the shroud from the pineal gland of the pineal gland, so that the enlightenment that's been provided for us can have a home to rest in. When Jesus talked about the birds have nests, the foxes have holes, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. I do believe that Jesus was saying that the Son of Man, this human, the authority that this human has been given.
No, this is on around the glass part.
Would you mute your phone, please? Would you make sure that your phone is muted? I do believe that Jesus was speaking about the authority that he recognized that he was born with, and recognized that he was to impart to humanity, was finding no resting place in the souls of humanity. I believe we are the extension of his desires, in that we have opportunity and we're taking advantage of this opportunity to make sure that the authority with which we were born and the understanding that we are being given in regards to the wisdom of the scriptures is finding a resting place in the soul of humanity. Not souls, but in the soul of humanity. Because we are not looking to do this on an individual level at all, because that is an impossibility. We are realizing that just as our words are universal, the soul is as well. And when we impregnate the universal soul with the truth, then the universal soul will begin to birth truth. And as the universal soul births truth, then we will begin to see not only majestic things take place. We'll begin to see the mysteries unfold. We'll begin to see that the mysteries were only mysteries because our focus was on something contrary to what truth is, which means that the mystical thing would be missing the truth when it was been right in front of us all the time, and embracing something that doesn't even exist. Any questions or comments, please? I do invite the questions from those who were on yesterday, those who were taking notes, and have questions for us today. Would you please raise them?
Pastor, I have an observation, and I really think it supports what you just said. I find some parts of Hebrew chapter 9 fascinating, and one of the things that I'm reading Hebrew chapter 9, verses 16 and 17. It says, "For where a covenant is, must of necessity be the death of the one who made it. For a covenant is valid only when men are dead, but it is never enforced while the one who made it lives." I think that I'm just looking at this as a supposition, I suppose, that the physical manifestation of this happened at the crucifixion, but the spiritual fulfillment of it is taking place right now. As the high priest and the sacrifice, Jesus had, his role was not complete at the crucifixion, and maybe that is being fulfilled right now. The comment that I was talking about with the new heaven and the new earth, it is not coincident that he considered himself the Son of Man, and Barabbas being the son of a boom. So here you have the heavens and the earth coming together, but the heavens not realizing who and what it is and the light that it can become or is until there is a death. So he kills the side of himself that releases the energy to show him who he is, and thus makes heaven and earth one, meaning that the access there for the enlightenment to flow freely. And then this covenant is fulfilled in the way that I don't think it was fulfilled until understanding came about and someone came into the earth with a willingness to take on this responsibility. So we talk about this, and I'll just listen to what you were just said. I think it links that together beautifully because it's hard to see, because we've been taught that we are going to live in heaven. It's hard to see the new heaven and new earth, and nobody ever taught us or even said, what is this new earth supposed to look like? What is the purpose of it if you're even living in heaven? So it is talking about enlightenment. It's not a physical thing at all. It is talking about the fulfillment of recognizing who you are, seeing that you are light, and that you have access to all there is. And the oneness completes the fulfillment of what the scripture is. So not only are we learning this and take on the responsibility, this is a fulfillment of what was written many, many years ago. I'm done.
Ron, what you just described is a will that has been written. Because if you look at that testament, it can be translated, or should have been translated as a will. So the will is being litigated now by the universe.
Okay. I see that.
And the litigation of that will is informing humanity of not only who it is, but what it has inherited. As a result of the teachings of Jesus, we are learning that Jesus actually taught us what we were to inherit. The things the principles that we have ownership of because of our heritage, because of who created us and whose seed we are. Jesus was informing us of this inheritance. And up until now, we have been taught that the only inheritance that we could seek to possess would be that of dying, exiting these bodies and entering the pearly gates of something called heaven, as opposed to understanding that Jesus was telling us, it is written in the will that you are the same as the Father. And it is in this will, the Father said, says that you will be delivered from your blindness, because it is the desire of the Creator that all be delivered from their blindness, that all be saved. This has nothing to do with church membership, nothing to do with what happens when you die. It has everything to do with what happens while we are inhabitants of these bodies. It is much easier to be spiritual when you are only spirit. It is much more difficult to be spiritual when you are spirit living in a body that deems you to be human. And Jesus was telling us, and still is, as the universe litigates this will, release as much as you can about about humanness, being human, and embrace all that you can about being spiritual, because the humanness is what restricts you. The humanness is what keeps you in bondage and makes you more susceptible to manipulation and makes you more susceptible to being enslaved, be your mind, your soul. When you become aware of the essence of who you are for real, beyond just saying it, but experiencing it, it is then that you know what true freedom feels like. Why? Because when you know that you are the truth, you are free. That there is no bondage in truth. There is a free flowing of life itself in truth. So it is not so much of knowing the truth in terms of knowledge. It's about experiencing it. And when we experience it, when we know the truth, when we experience the truth, what's being said is that there is nothing else to go back to, because you realize that it doesn't exist and it never has. So here we are, sitting in the courtroom of the universe, listening to the universe litigate the will that was left for us during the period of crucifixion. And the litigation of the will says that not only are we to look at what is being litigated by virtue of what Jesus left or taught, but also we have to understand the other side of the coin. Understand the resistance that has been put forth against our embracing what happened with Jesus. Almost from the time that Jesus was crucified, it wasn't that long after the resurrection that the manipulation started. It was not that long afterwards that you had people like Paul talking out of both sides of his mouth in order to get people to follow him, in order to get people to believe what he was teaching, but also to hold on to what they wanted to believe. If Paul was not a New Testament Nimrod, I don't know who was. We are in a state now where we have to deal with the truth as it is, not so much as we see it, but also as it is. And in doing so, we have opened ourselves up. We've opened ourselves up to be recipients of truth that we never knew, but we've also opened ourselves up for rejection. And the very ones who seek to reject are the ones who need us the most. We are to be more cognizant of how we speak when we are speaking to those who need us the most. The ones who, a blind man needs someone with sight more so than someone with sight does. Any questions or comments? Were there any questions written yesterday? Or maybe we answered them, I don't know.
Hey, Pastor. This is Ron again. I hate to be the only one talking, but I got a question for Rainier. When we first started yesterday, she mentioned a book that she was looking at or she was familiar with that talked about the African being the scapegoat. And I just would like to hear more about that book if she's on the line, please.
Yeah, I'm on the line. So there was a book called, I think I brought it up before, Cast, The Origins of Our Discontents. Wilkerson, I think is the author.
Isabella Wilkerson.
Yeah, Isabel. Yeah, and she talks about what the scapegoat meant in society and how critical that role was, even in small groups. And it allowed, in essence, for the pecking order to fall naturally in a group. You know, you had this person who was the best and so forth, and that scapegoat was the one who always the butt of the jokes, the one who was always getting the worst raw end of the stick, you know, all those sayings. And she talked about how when that scapegoat was taken out of a group, it couldn't function anymore, and that's what the undesirables were in India. That's what Black folk are in the U.S. The untouchables in India. Blacks in the U.S. We're that scapegoat. We're the ones that helps everybody else feel better about themselves because at least they're not us. But then what's left for the scapegoat? You know, because you still are who you are. You know. But it was a very interesting aspect of being in a caste system was that scapegoat role. Is that what you were asking about? Yeah. But as y'all were talking yesterday and I could finally hear, y'all talked about what I was asked or kind of bringing up. So I didn't have more.
This is Barbara. I wonder if what lots of people are experiencing right now is the change in the quote unquote status, for lack of another word, of people of color. And so they are rebelling, and it's just got them all out of kilter. And that's why you hear all of these anti all of these people who are talking all of this stuff that does not resonate with what being a United States citizen is.
That, you know, Mom, that's exactly what I was thinking as the discussion was going yesterday. And this author did bring up that when we started to erode away at the caste system in the when the slavery went away initially, and then in the 60s, there were these times when health among Caucasians dropped and wellness and more suicides because, again, what at least had differentiated them, no matter what, no matter how poor, no matter how worse off, they weren't Black. And when you got rid of that bumper, that delineation in your identity, there were lots of health and wellness impacts on that group in particular. And I feel like that's kind of what we're seeing that January 6th, you know, was just the kind of the part of that for me too.
Well, I believe wholeheartedly that's what it is. But if you look at, excuse me, the first time that there was a major demonstration worldwide was during the George Floyd murder. And without even seeing it, the energy presented itself no more. We are not going to be the scapegoat anymore. You're not going to talk about, excuse me, a criminal record. You're not going to talk about the criminality of the person you murdered and shift our vision from that. And that was the attitude across the board. And by that attitude being the same, now it's been there with us as a people, but with that attitude being worldwide, whether consciously or not, they saw control slipping away. They saw that there was a unifying of humanity, and that unification was for the express purpose of making sure that everyone, regardless of who they were, are treated humanely. But in addition to that, to not be able to control what happened with the demonstration with George Floyd, in addition to that, as if that were not enough, the loud clarion voices that spoke to the inequities of what happened with COVID when it came to job disparities, people losing everything because they were on the lower scale of income, the health disparity, everything came to the forefront. And now what happened is that we are losing our grip. And this is the thing that really, really got me. The very ones who are suffering from the disparity of income and health services are the ones who are being blamed for that disparity. What do we hear? All you have to do is work harder. No one works harder than we do. All you have to do is get the right job and you have the right health insurance. Being blamed for everything that's wrong, that's the scapegoat. And you're right, that's January 6th. That's the results of January 6th. It is imperative that we stay the course and move forward as quickly and powerfully as possible. Why? Because January 6th was a precursor to what can be. January 6th is not an isolated incident. There was a January 6th, maybe not at the nation's capital, but there were local January 6ths all over this nation during Reconstruction. And what did it result in? It resulted in what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It resulted in what happened in Hemingway, South Carolina. It resulted in what happened in Rosewood, Florida, Durham, North Carolina. It resulted in the death of Emmett Till. It resulted in the death of the civil rights workers in Philadelphia, Mississippi. And what ushered in this phase of January 6th was Ronald Reagan. When he went to Philadelphia, Mississippi to announce his run for the presidency, he was speaking volumes to the African and to that Caucasian-type mindset that went into that Capitol on January the 6th. If you don't elect me, you're going to have more like these three who were killed here in Philadelphia, Mississippi. We are at a stage now where we have to make sure that we speak the truth no matter how uncomfortable it is to them or to us. Them meaning those who are in power. I am not talking about the Black Caucus because they have no power. They are a corporation now. I'm talking about those in power who actually make the decision as to what laws are going to be passed. We are at a place where we have the power to influence all of that, and we must take advantage of that for the benefit of this globe. Because whatever happens here reverberates worldwide. If America sneezes, the rest of the world gets pneumonia. And we must make sure that we are the vanguard of all of the positive change of the desire for peace and harmony. Questions, comments?
I have kind of a comment, observation, question. I don't know. I'm not sure how to put it into words, but it's just a resonance that I have inside me. And I think understanding this scapegoat archetype, persona, whatever you want to call it, I think it's the catalyst for some change that's gonna happen. And I agree with what Rainier was talking about and what you said, Pastor, about, and then what Ron was talking about in Hebrews 9, at the end when it was talking about Christ making a second coming. And I think that second, to me, it resonates inside me that second coming is the scapegoat persona who will take on all those sins, entanglements, or whatever. But I also want us to elaborate on, okay, so the scapegoat takes on all the sins, all the entanglements and all, and then it's sent out into the desert. And then what happens out there in the desert? There's no evidence in the scripture of what happens out there. But I think it's basically what you probably have said. Once the scapegoat is out there in the desert and dealing with all those entanglements, it's between that persona, that scapegoat persona, and the creator. And I think the creator's intention, and I'm taking a leap here, but anyway, I think the creator's intention for the scapegoat going out into the wilderness is for the scapegoat to have the opportunity to cast it all off, and be casted off, be refreshed, and then maybe come back for more. I don't know. But I do have a real feeling that understanding this scapegoat archetype is going to be a catalyst for change. But I would like us to discuss, what happens with a scapegoat going into the desert.
What
she was listening and didn't even know it. She heard and didn't even understand.
Again, good morning, everybody. This is George, and what you were speaking of, Audrey, it made me think about, and again, hopefully this has some relativity, but when Moses slaying the Egyptian, he ran or went into the wilderness. Mm-hmm. And in terms of me just looking at it as a scapegoat, I'm saying to myself, okay, well, he ran into the wilderness. There was something that he needed to deal with in terms of that experience. And then at the same time, again, him, dealing with Jethro and just basically, dealing with laws or just dealing with all that he was consumed with. I'm just trying to see it as in terms of the scapegoat, or what does that mean, or does it have any relevance? So I just wanted to ask that question, Pastor, in terms of, is there any relevancy to Moses being a scapegoat for slaying the Egyptians, and does that have any relationship to Barabbas or what we're talking about?
Yes.
You know, I had thought of Moses too, but I thought of it in terms of Moses' wife being the scapegoat, because once he married her, and then she was responsible in a kind of way that she had to take on all of what he was dealing with. And then he just left her and went back. And we don't hear much about her anymore. So to me, she was a kind of scapegoat persona. But I can see what you're saying, George, about Moses too.
I would like to speak to both of those, because I see yes, Moses in regards to what George is saying, receiving his being the scapegoat, being seditionist, and being shown in his wilderness who he really is by a priest, which means that the scapegoat in the wilderness comes to a knowledge of who it really was created to be, and in returning to the scene becomes leadership, becomes a leader, a type of leader that brings people to a place of an eye-opening experience. Then, when Audrey, when you said this about the wife of Moses, if you look at the scapegoat in the Hebrew, it actually speaks of a female goat, and what I see in that is the African woman has always been the scapegoat. The African woman has toiled in the field of change forever and a day, with very little recognition, but even more burdens put on her shoulders. The African woman has been the brunt of jokes and has been the brunt of the desires of men in terms of pleasure, and has been looked down upon, and at the same time, their strength has been used against them, as opposed to recognizing the strength has been called the angry black woman, and has been manipulated, and know that she was being there was manipulation in progress, but to rebel against that would mean that she would lose her space in terms of identity or in terms of employment, allowing herself to be manipulated for the protection of her family, her community, etc. So if there is anyone who is in a human body who can be known beyond any other beyond any other expression, it is an African woman being that scapegoat. That African woman born in this country has carried a greater burden. Look at what happened with Stacey Abrams. Even her own people were against her when she ran for that position, saying she was an angel mommy. The names they called her, the attitude towards her, these kinds of things are the things that has put a spotlight on the scapegoat experience. Yes, Barabbas, son of Vroom, being or seen as the scapegoat, but we are not talking about this, the physicality of the biology of the person as much as the concept itself. However, even after Barabbas, the greatest representative of that concept has been the African woman born in this nation. And it is the reason, it is for this reason that I believe the universe, the Creator, has moved that African woman to a place where she is going to be heard and her power is going to be felt. Questions or comments about that?
So you're saying we've had our wilderness experience and now we're coming out of it?
Yes. See, when the maleness of it all is supposed to be protection. The concept of the maleness of it all was to be a shield that disallowed this to take place. But the shield, the protector, became that African woman standing between the slave owner with the whip and the man he was going to whip. The woman telling her children to be quiet, muffling their sound, their cries to the point of death in some cases, to protect them, knowing that she was killing her child, but rather die trying to save her child than to see her child raped or molested or sold or beaten to death before her eyes, that kind of thing. I cannot overly emphasize the importance of understanding the plight that the African woman has endured in this nation, and now the Creator is saying no more. As long as there was a Martin Luther King out there marching, as long as there was a Malcolm X out there, as long as there was a Al Sharpton out there, nobody really paid it that much of attention because they knew they had the control. But the moment that Stacey Abrams jumped out there, look what happened. All hell broke loose. The little boy took the finger out of the dike and everything flooded. And with that flood came a flood of votes in Georgia that it has never seen in its history before, because it was that African female energy that led the charge. That's what I'm saying.
I want to speak to a lot of this, what's being said. Yesterday when we got off, I just quickly jotted down at a moment. If Jesus, in the sense that we were told, died for our sins, then he also did that. He did this to quote unquote save Barabbas. And when we say he did this for our sins, that does not mean at all, from looking at it from yesterday, that he himself did something to change us, but what he gave Barabbas the opportunity to go in the wilderness. He gave us the opportunity to look within ourselves to go into that wilderness. The same way he was taking the disciples into the wilderness, in the mountain, on the desert, so to speak, that opportunity to change. He wasn't himself changing anyone. It was the people who, through their quote unquote faith, had gone within to make these miracles happen for themselves, not the ones that he performed for himself, but the miracles he performed for them. The person being able to see, the person being able to heal, etc. It was because of their belief. So in a sense, what Jesus did, he did not change these conditions. He set himself up as a mirror, so to speak, for those people to then see those things within themselves, or at least even see the possibility of it. So for example, when we see something that we deem as being terrible, or we see something that is very loving and touching, we feel that thing within ourselves through that experience. So when Jesus says that we would do greater things, he is saying that we're doing the same exact thing that he was doing, because he himself is not wasn't changing, but giving people the opportunities to change, so to speak. as we were talking about the scapegoat and who's been the scapegoat throughout history, and had that opportunity to also go in the wilderness and talk about how things were changing recently. And we talked about George Floyd, and we also talked about Ferguson. And I also think about even what's going on in Palestine right now, and how on a global scale, how many people who remained silent for a very long time. And we're talking about the common people who were considered as being the scapegoats in their own right, in their own local jurisdictions, have stood up with the Palestinians and saying, no, this is not right. We will not do anything that goes on to prolong it or contributing to the oppression of Palestinians. Ports across the world are shut down, refusing to unload Israeli ships, things of that nature. The government, even locally and in other places, but even the United States government, catching literal hell now all of a sudden when it comes to supporting Israel with the common citizens and, you know, party members and things like that, who have historically allowed and gone along with things, saying, oh, look, something must be done. This is not right. Just a huge outcry. And as we've been talking, I can't help but to think about how many, as you say, Pastor Richard, the soul, not just the souls, but the soul being in the wilderness and coming up to a greater awareness of itself over time. And then, of course, the idea of the scapegoat being, and going back to January the 6th, that which is viewed as a threat is often the one that is blamed as being the scapegoat. And of course, when the scapegoat gets out of hand or refuses to be the scapegoat, so to speak, it becomes even more of a threat, which causes a lot of worriedness over those who were essentially blaming the scapegoat. But I guess the last part, just in terms of all the times during those wilderness when Jesus went in the wilderness himself, or took those in the wilderness, we have over and over again where there was not that just knowledge, but an experience of being one with Abba, changing the perception of those involved, etc. I'm finished.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? I would like to hear from as many of you as possible, especially those who are involved with the discussion. Some of you who've not spoken today, what do you see here, guided from this, or how do you see it? Just expressions, please.
Pastor, it's Ron again. I just want to say this on the heels of what Sheldon just said, because I think it was the Ozzy Arania was talking about, asked a question about the purpose of the wilderness, and I think he summed it up. It is the opportunity for transformation, and you know, listening to what everybody said, including George's example too. The scriptures is filled with people going into the wilderness, and it is an opportunity for contemplation and to see yourself and see the real you, who you are, and to transform from your humanness into the spiritual self or your soul self. So I think it's been summed up. I want to make sure if there may be any other questions on that part.
Ron, I agree. And what I was talking about in Hebrews chapter 9 at the end of that verse where it's talking about the second coming of Christ, I think once you've had that wilderness experience and you come out of it a new person, that is a second coming of Christ in itself.
Yeah, you're being transformed. But the first Christ, I think, is your recognition that, whoa, look at who I am, kind of a thing that we all go through. And in my case, just using me for an example, like, is this right? Is this me? And you go through, or can I do this? And you go through a why not me kind of thing. But it's all a part of the growth part. And because when I first read that, I had problems with the second coming of Christ because I didn't quite see it that way, but I understand what the writer is trying to say. So once you recognize who you are, you realize that you do have you play a role in not only transforming and refreshing yourself, but actually the redemption of mankind. Bringing in forgiveness and love and kindness, and as Pastor said earlier, harmony into the land. You not only play a role in it, you are it, and you take that on and you accept that responsibility. And the exciting part, it becomes exciting then because you recognize that I can be influenced, I can make a difference, I can be the life that someone sees in themselves, So I think that's where we are now. We're at the place where we're recognizing what is taking place and the beings that we are, especially if we see ourselves as being one in the energy that holds and what we can do with that, the wisdom and understanding that has come to us is no coincidence.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say.
Yeah, but again, I think it's important, that we're hearing this because, some of the myth is we talk about, Jesus, we talk about Yeshua being resurrected, but we don't, people don't see themselves as being resurrected. And I think that's, the point of emphasis that, as, I think Sheldon mentioned or someone to take on the mind of Christ or Yeshua, is that, again, these things that I've done, you should do greater, but more importantly, we are resurrected. I am resurrected. And so now I think it gives much more power. We have the power to be able to discover who we really are. And so, again, I concur, and I'm, grateful to hear again, Audrey, that you mentioned about the resurrection, in terms of our own being as Elohim. Those are my thoughts. I'm done.
I hit the nail on the head, George. We don't see ourselves as being resurrected. That's it. We are being resurrected as we speak.
Well, not only that.
Yes.
We are the resurrection. It's because resurrection is about the resurrection of truth, right? It's about bringing truth.
Okay.
Because in the lives.
Amen.
In the lives of men, truth has been dead. Not that truth itself is dead, but in the.
Can you speak up?
I said in the lives.
Can you speak up a little bit?
What about now?
Thank you.
In the lives of men.
Yes, thank you.
Truth has been dead. It has not, in the mind, it's been dead. It's not that truth died, it's that it's dead to them. And as long as we deal with theology, truth remains dead to us. And because people have a desire to protect their self-interest, we will be challenged on whether or not this is the truth, but not on the basis of whether we're telling the truth, but saying things like that's not doctrinal, as opposed to addressing the true issue of what's being said. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. Yes.
So in essence, we are truth itself is the point I'm trying to make. And to recognize that you're truth itself, that in itself means that nothing can contain you, and that's why truth makes you free.
Yes, and it is those, as you say, the theology and those systems that we buy into as well, or have bought into, I would say, in the past, that also help to make us the scapegoat. But in buying into those systems that you just mentioned, theology, etc., is to turn away and deny the truth. For we had to buy into those things. We had to deny the truth in order to buy into those things, because in a sense, those systems of what we bought into were, and I'm just going to make up a word, it was de-godding or de-Abba, as in anti us having awareness of who and what we are, and our being Abba and connected to Abba being Elohim, etc.
Yes. Anyone else? Comments, questions? What you got from this? Where you see it? Where you see we are at this juncture?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I would like for Kathy to please, if she can remember what she said on yesterday about what's in the wilderness. She said so much yesterday I couldn't process it, but I just would like for her to recap on that if she can and if she will.
Kathy?
Yes. I was just looking at it from the perspective of the name Barabbas being the son of Abba, and I just jotted down my thoughts, and I said, if I look at the character of the man Barabbas, it's not, if we are looking at, I guess, the concept in and of itself, not perfect, but that he is the scapegoat that is chosen to live because he has the heart and the spiritual nature to bring about changes for the nation. He continues to be sacrificed. And we know that we talked about on yesterday that when we're looking at the scapegoat is the goat which lives. But when we look at the George Floyds and all of these people, we see those as the scapegoats that continue to be sacrificed. And like I said, I'm speaking conceptually of who we are. Continues to be sacrificed because his purpose is not known to him. And as a result, because it is unknown to him and it's denied, it is rejected by those who see who we are. And we talked yesterday, it's like the priest representing those in authority, that mindset of those in authority. It is rejected by those because of envy. And we talked about, I'm trying to remember how I said it, how the scripture started off talking about after Aaron's sons died. And I was saying that Aaron's sons tried to make a sacrifice of fire that was a strange fire to God. It was not the way anything was supposed to be presented to him coming into his presence. And as a result of that, fire represents purification. And everything that we were talking about yesterday was leading us to a place of purification. So I think, and I'm still pulling it together as I'm talking, when we talked about going into the wilderness and having that wilderness experience, we know that the wilderness, I think Barbara was saying yesterday, it can be a place of destruction, and of course it can be. if you stay in that mind state and don't see who you are, it becomes a place of destruction. But when you go into the wilderness and you begin to have this opportunity to sit with yourself and to understand who you are, it becomes a place of heightened sense of awareness, and it allows you to see who you are. And I think what we were saying this morning, then you come out of that wilderness with a sense of your identity. And that is the rebirth, and that is the things that we've been talking about today. So I think I kind of said it that way, maybe. Questions or comments?
Well, you said a lot on yesterday, and what you're saying today, it fits in as well. I think you also said that in the wilderness there's comfort, there's some other things. A lot of times we look at going into the wilderness as a negative thing, but I do feel that it's necessary. But when you said something about there's comfort there and other things, I guess you said it depends on your mindset, on how you are when you go in there, in that place. So I just
and I think, Evelyn, one of the things that we looked at, and I talked about this after we got off the line yesterday because I thought of it. I didn't see it then. But one of the things that we didn't address was the scapegoat when he is led into the wilderness by the consciousness of man, because it says a man waits to lead the scapegoat out of the city. But before he is led away, hands are laid on the scapegoat's head. And the scripture was very specific about saying hands being laid on the head. And the conversation that I was having on yesterday was, and Pastor, I would like for you to say what you said to me about that yesterday, how this is where the confusion comes in for us. This is like, that is when our understanding of who we are by the laying on of hands, that's where the confusion comes in. And that's when we begin to not understand and see our identity. And so I would like for you to speak to that. But the main thing was that confusion comes in, but that wilderness, and this is something that I see the wilderness as being, and please, by all means, anyone else chime in because I feel like I'm struggling this morning. But where I see it coming in is we deem it as a bad place sometimes. But if I find myself in that what I would call, quote unquote, wilderness place, and I recognize and sit with myself and begin to understand what is it that I am to get from this, and I allow myself to be open up in that place and of understanding to flow to me, the wilderness is the place where I can come out stronger simply because I am elevated in my spiritual understanding of all things that's happening to me. We see wilderness experiences as why this is happening to me, this is something bad. But we've been taught if I learn to embrace that wilderness experience, I am going to come out of this gleaning the light from that experience, transforming that light into something that is going to empower me to see who I am. So, Pastor, would you also speak to the laying on of hands on the scapegoat's head, please?
Sure. And no, you weren't struggling. What I saw as the laying on of hands is that the reason that both hands were laid on the head of the scapegoat is it was the imparting of all the entanglement of the nation into the mindset of the scapegoat, and what happened is it resulted in the scapegoat doing everything in that while it was in that wilderness, it was doing everything it could to fit in, to be accepted by those who laid their hands on it, or those who burdened it with all of the adversities that it was to face. Examples of that would be if I build a house in a certain neighborhood, if I get a job making a certain amount of money, if I dress a certain way, if I comb my hair a certain way, then I will be accepted. All of these things were imparted into the scapegoat. And I see now that authority has, for the most part, shifted from from just the powers that be in terms of the religious powers who maintain that structure by indoctrinating those who sit in the pews, but I also saw it move into education as well. One of the major drawbacks that people saw with integration was they're going to take our schools away. We won't be able to teach our kids, and they're going to destroy all of our institutions, and that happened. Well, with the education system, there was there was always the push to be white, to be more like the oppressor in terms of how you dress, etc. The things I said earlier. These are the impediments that were imparted to the scapegoat, and the design was to keep them in a wilderness, wandering, always trying to measure up but never quite getting there. However, with that scapegoat being in the wilderness, there was always a Jethro, and that Jethro being in that wilderness became a mirror for the scapegoat. And when the scapegoat looked in the mirror, it did not see the face of its oppressor; it saw its own face, and the face that it saw was a face of deliverance. And what it felt in its heart for the oppressor was sorrow for the oppressor's ignorance. And instead of searching to be who it was created to be, was searching to destroy someone who was there as a priest to them. So, again, the scapegoat was the laying on of hands on a female. It was a female goat, and the religion is the one who did this. And I keep going back to this thing where the priests, in the scriptures, the priests wrote things that they were not instructed by Yahweh to do, just as they are doing today. So I'm hoping, I know I never say the same thing the same way twice, but I'm hoping that I captured the gist of what was being said, Kathy.
You did. Does that make sense, Evelyn?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Kathy and Pastor.
See, our struggle has been so, our indoctrination has been so ingrained in us until it is difficult sometimes for us to see it. And I can readily see what happens in the educational system. I remember very vividly going to Sims High, and we had all African teachers and students, and how they avail themselves of every moment to make sure that we excelled, and how they made us understand the necessity of learning. And there was only one caveat that we didn't grasp then but do now. It was so we could be successful in a society that was going to make sure that we can't be successful. But then I saw something else. I experienced going to school with a group of people who went to school to learn. When I'm talking about college now. I went to a school, Federal City College, is now defunct. They established that school in 1968, 69, and destroyed it around 73, 74. What am I saying to you? This school was a hotbed of wilderness experiences where people were learning who they were. Yes, it was on a national level, not spiritual. Every single person, Stoker Carmichael, Rap Brown, Jesse Jackson, everyone who was involved, every organization who was involved in the civil rights movement came through Federal City College. So the government called themselves merging it, and now you cannot find anywhere in D.C. that says Federal City College where even existed at all. It's almost like the guy who had no beginning and no end. That's how that school appears to be. At that school, people were learning who they are. So now what happened, education morphed into something totally different. It was not designed to teach you anything other than how to be managed when you got a job. That's it. The education of self ceased. So this in itself intensified the journey in the wilderness and made it even more difficult to find self while in the wilderness. However, because there was a determination for the resurrection of truth, because there was a such thing as a second coming, and we just now begin to understand what that means. That second coming meaning the resurrection of truth, a true nature of the scriptures, understanding what they truly are saying, and understanding that the reason, no matter whether you are reading from the Gita in the Hindu, or whether you're reading from the Quran or the Bible or any holy book, all of them are saying the same thing. Why? Because the universe was determined that humanity is going to see the truth at some point. And because a group of people came together at the behest of the universe to search for this truth in serendipitous ways, of course, here we are coming out of the wilderness with an understanding of self. Not selfishness, but self. Knowing that the concept of understanding self is the same concept of understanding who humanity really is. This idea of a wilderness experience did not start with Cain and Abel. It started with Adam being extricated from the garden, that entity, that being extricated from the spiritual place because of his adverse attitude towards a womb, because of its desire to do what it wanted to do the way it wanted to do it, which in itself is a righteous thing because it gives us opportunity to follow a pathway that leads us back to our essence, or a pathway that leads us deeper into the wilderness. But it matters not how deep we go into the wilderness. The day will always come when there will be someone standing in the gap. And that day has presented itself, and we have taken responsibility for standing in this gap. We have taken responsibility for being the bridge over which those who are seeking truth can travel. And now, it is imperative that we stay the course, search for the truth of everything that is, rethink everything, and the very next time that we look at Barabbas and Jesus, we will look at them with fresh eyes. We will read it as though we've never seen it before, and we will talk about it as though we never heard it before. And that is how we find the deeper truth, the deeper understanding of the wisdom that's laying in plain sight, the wisdom that we have been presented with but have never been able to understand until recently. Questions, comments? So
has the last day.
Go ahead.
No, I just want to ask, has the last 2 days been clear? Is there anyone who doesn't understand something that has been said or would like clarity on it? Does this make sense?
Ron,
Okay.
This is Barbara. For me, it doesn't make sense. For me, it resonates, which is a deeper vibration than the logical making sense.
Thank you. It does with me as well. We look at the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we see things that Jesus did, and it looks like they may have been by chance or haphazardly done. That somebody come up to him when he's on his way to Jerusalem. He does this. He heals this person. He feeds that person. But this is a journey that he's outlining, and He's growing and showing you how to grow your spiritual self, how to see your soul. So none of that is by chance when we read it. And the same thing with the journeys that we're taking. We do not fear the wilderness because it is a place that truth is shown to us. So we go in and we come out, and we go in and we come out. And each one of us have had wilderness experiences, or we would not be here on this phone. Each and every one of us took a journey to get here, and we may have known someone else that said, "Hey, come listen to this," but you took your own steps to get here. So your soul person is feeling the vibrations of who you are from the universe, as Barbara just put it. But I just want to make sure we do this 3 times a week and do it lovingly and with peace and harmony. And I hope everybody is gaining something from it and feeling the love and the vibration of not just from the voices that you hear, but from what resonates in you, that you too are understanding who you are. That's all.
Thank you, sir.
Ron, I just want to add to that that it always takes a wilderness experience to come to that point. So,
yes,
so that people understand that wilderness experience is not a bad thing.
Correct.
It might feel
yes.
bad when you're in it, but you come out the other side.
And I will comment.
Do indeed.
I will add to the comment about the wilderness, even as Evelyn mentioned comfort before. Part of the reason why it's considered a wilderness at first sight, or from just a lack of understanding, it can be viewed, notice I said from a lack of understanding, viewed as being lost. And in a sense, at first, it is being lost. The reason why there is a loss is because that for which the individual identified with at the beginning no longer exists. And that is what is actually being replaced, so to speak. So in a sense, something is being taken away when going first in the wilderness, or part of this wilderness experience. But it's as if something is being taken away, but that thing must be taken away in order to have the increased awareness, in order to have the upgrade, in a sense. That thing no longer fits. If you wanted to look at it from a physical standpoint, it's the same idea of having on some torn clothes that are falling apart and now too tight because you're growing, and you have to take those off before you can put on more comfortable clothes that fit, etc. And speaking of comfort, the reason why the wilderness can be comforting is because many of the ideas, the false sense of self that is held in the beginning before going into the wilderness, in a way is binding and oppressive in itself, in terms of it's heavy and is holding you, holding us down, so to speak. So that is a way that the wilderness can provide comfort in a sense.
So the perceived physical wilderness, in a sense, meaning wherever I am, whatever circumstances that surround me seem to be oppressive to me, that seem to isolate me, is an opportunity for a spiritual sacrifice, in a sense. In other words, in that silence of hearing the voice of our womb and the reassurance and the comfort of finding that I'm one, then I sacrifice all of those things that I thought were important to me, that thing that I thought was lost, the thing that I thought was significant in my life, and understand that that's not significant at all. And so if sacrifice is putting behind you those things that separate you from a womb so that you can be closer to a womb, then the wilderness experience is a type of sacrifice. And I think we talked about yesterday, well, you know, if they wanted to kill the scapegoat, if they wanted to sacrifice the scapegoat, why don't they just kill him then? Well, the issue is about the spiritual sacrifice, which leads to spiritual life. And that's what the wilderness offered the scapegoat.
Okay, thank you guys. Anyone else? Before we go, I would like to ask if it's any way possible that yesterday and today's video recordings be released, or be uploaded rather, as soon as possible, because a lot has been said, and I do believe that they are very pertinent to not only where we are, but what we are going to begin seeing instantly in terms of change. So, is that a possibility, Miss Janice?
Only since you asked so nicely.
I'm being nice.
Yeah, we'll take care of it.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Because I do want Sheldon to repeat the number again before we get off. Now, you watch. We'll do this, and then everything will be clear next week, right? Are there any other questions or comments prior to our looking forward to tomorrow evening? Because we do have tomorrow to raise the same questions as well. Okay. Again, we are grateful for the presence. Go ahead, Sheldon.
No, go ahead.
No.
Okay. To call into the Zoom, hope everyone who needs it has something to write with, but I will repeat it as well. The Zoom call-in phone number is 646-558-8656. Once again, the Zoom call-in phone number is 646-558-8656. Once you call in, you will be asked to give a meeting ID. The meeting ID number is 949-9623-8960. Once again, the meeting ID number is 949-9623-8960. All right, one last time, Zoom call-in phone number, 646-558-8656. Meeting ID, 949-9623-8960. The operator will also ask you for a participant's number. You don't have to worry about that. Just press pound and you will be joined. Is there anyone who needs me to repeat that who may not have gotten that?
Yes, repeat it again, please.
Okay. The phone number, 558 8656. Mute your phone, please. Meeting ID 949 9623 8960.
One more time, Sheldon.
Phone number 646 558 8656. Meeting ID 949 9623 8960. And for anyone who has a Zoom account downloaded on their mobile device or any electronic device, they could just use the meeting ID as well, that same meeting ID.
And what was the part about the participant?
You could just ignore that. You could just ignore that when it asks for a participant number or participant code. You could just press pound.
Okay.
But she will also tell the operator will also tell you that you can just press pound. That's not going to prevent you from getting in.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mom, I sent you that information. It's in the contact card I texted to you, so you have it already.
Okay. All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that it?
Yeah.
I mean, we could make Sheldon just talk a little bit longer, but I guess we could wrap up.
No one wants to hear from me.
We wouldn't have to make you do that. It wouldn't take much. I want to again thank you guys for everything. And humanity is better because of your determination. And we will talk again tomorrow. Okay, be strong. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Good evening.
Goodbye.
Have a good weekend, good week, good day.